Have a guess. How many Muslims do you think there are in the world?
Way too many, Piers. I prefer one dog over 100 million Muslims.
Okay. Yeah, that's a disgusting, offensive, and vile thing to say. It's very much on
Why?
brand for you. But how many
Why?
Muslims
They like
are
to
there in
rape
the world?
goats. They like to rape little girls. That's normal.
Yeah, how many Muslims are there? How many Muslims are there in the world?
I don't know, Piers. That's not something I care about. How many Christians are in the world?
Have a
Piers?
guess. Have a guess.
Have a guess on how many Christians are in the world.
No, I'm asking the questions. How many Muslims would you think there are in the world?
I already said way too many, 1 billion. And they have 56 Muslim nations.
How many?
They should go there and live in, in their 56 Muslim nations very happily amongst each other.
There is a difference between exposing a real crime and blaming an entire population for it. And in this debate, that distinction becomes impossible to ignore. Valentina Gomez points to horrific crimes committed by specific individuals and then repeatedly expands that accusation until it covers Muslims as a whole. So Piers Morgan asks her a very simple question. How many people are you actually talking about? And the answer tells you everything. Because when you make an accusation against nearly 2 billion people, you cannot hide behind a handful of criminal cases. You have to explain the leap from individual criminals to an entire religion. And to be clear, the grooming gang scandals were real. The victims deserved justice. The failures of authorities deserve scrutiny. But none of that proves that Muslims as a whole are criminals. And that is exactly where this argument starts falling apart. I'm Neil. This is The Honest Perspective. Truth matters more than tribal loyalty. Let's get into it.
Let me bring in Valentina Gomez to respond to that.
Finally, Piers. What a boatload of crap that was, honestly. Just straight up ranting nonstop. Exactly what Muslims do. Just try to confuse you, blow up, and just yell nonstop. Piers, let's be honest. Muslims are a threat to national security. That's why Christians in Nigeria are being slaughtered by Muslims.
Do you know how many Muslims there are in the world?
No, I don't need to know.
Well, have a guess. How many Muslims do you think there are in the world?
Way too many, Piers. I prefer one dog over 100 million Muslims.
Okay. Yeah, that's a disgusting, offensive, and vile thing to say. It's very much on brand for you. But how many Muslims
They like
are
to
there
rape
in the world?
goats. They like to rape little girls. That's normal.
Yeah, how many Muslims are there? How many Muslims are there in the world?
I don't know, Piers. That's not something I care about. How many Christians are in the world?
Have a guess. Have a guess.
Have a guess on how many Christians are in the world.
No, I'm asking the questions. How many Muslims would you think there are in the world?
I already said way too many, 1 billion. And they have 56 Muslim nations.
How many?
They should go there and live in, in their 56 Muslim nations very happily amongst each other.
You describe all Muslims, because you're disgustingly Islamophobic, you describe all Muslims in the most disgusting manner. You call them a bunch of killers and rapists and so on. I'm just asking you a simple question to put these views into context. Do you know how many people you're talking about?
Piers, I do not rape, and I do not kill, and I do not steal. That's something the Muslims
How many Muslims are there in the world?
I already told you.
You say they all do
many.
this. How many?
I already told you, way too many, Piers. Just like they have taken over the UK.
You've no idea, have you? You have no idea how many people you are branding rapists and killers. You don't know, do you? You don't care.
For me to say it's too many.
You don't care, do you? Yeah, you don't care how many there are. You don't care the context of your vile comment.
And notice what just happened. Piers did not ask her to defend every Muslim in the world. He asked her to explain the scope of her own accusation. That's important, because there is a legitimate argument about specific crimes, specific perpetrators, specific communities, and whether authorities fail to act. Those questions should be investigated. But once you move from these men committed horrific crimes to Muslims or killers and rapists, you have made a completely different claim. And that claim now requires evidence on an entirely different scale. 2 billion people is not a criminal organization. A religion is not a defendant. And individual guilt does not become collective guilt simply because the individuals share a faith. Now watch what happens when Piers keeps pushing her on exactly that distinction.
How many girls have been raped by the Muslim rape gangs?
Piers,
Go ahead,
can
answer
I
my
address
question,
this point,
Piers.
Piers?
Are you going to try?
No, I'm talking to
Are you going to
Piers
try
right
and compare?
now. How many girls have been
Okay.
raped by the Muslim rape gangs? Just
Piers.
like Mohammed
Yeah,
raped
the-
6-year-old
the-
Can I ask a
Aisha.
question to
The
Valentina?
grooming gang.
No, I'm not
The
here
grooming
to talk with you.
scandal
I'm here
was
to talk
an
with Piers.
utter. The grooming scandal was an utter disgrace, and the perpetrators were finally brought to justice way
No.
longer than they should have been, and they were imprisoned for their disgusting actions. And what happened
That's not
there
true.
was a repulsive. There was a repulsive failure by our justice system to bring these people to account. However, I am asking you, because you brand all Muslims with the same way that you brand the people that committed the grooming gang scandal. You brand all Muslims the same way, but you have no idea how many Muslims there are. There are nearly 2 billion Muslims in this world. And what you're doing when you talk about them as a community of people
Let's
is
say
you're
it's
tarring
1 to
all
2 billion Muslims.
You're tarring
Piers
all
Morgan.
2
Yeah,
billion.
that's still
all
too
2
many.
billion. You are tarring. Let me finish. You are tarring all 2 billion people with the same brush of being killers and rapists and so on. To which I say to you, that is the purest personification of vile bigotry, racism, and Islamophobia. Why don't you focus on people of all religions
They follow a
who commit
book
heinous
that
crimes?
calls for the murder of Jews, Christians, Hindus, and infidels just because we don't abide, we don't bow down to their stupid rock, Piers Morgan. We don't do that in Christianity. In Christianity, if you want to be an atheist, if you want to worship a cow, if you want to worship a table, you're allowed to do that without getting killed. Because right now in Egypt, a 30-year-old man is being held in prison because he's about to get murdered by the government of Egypt because he is no longer a Muslim. He is now a
Piers,
Christian.
it's just not true.
And
Piers,
when you
if you
call-
don't mind,
when
can I
you
say
call-
something
when
here,
you
Piers?
call-
Piers, if you don't mind, can I say
Yes, I'll bring in Sammy Hamdi to respond, yeah.
That exchange exposes the central problem. The existence of a serious crime does not tell you that an entire religious population is responsible for it. And this is where we need to be intellectually honest on both sides. The grooming gang scandals should never be minimized. There were real victims. There were real perpetrators. And there were serious institutional failures. But the honest question is not whether those crimes happened. The honest question is, what does the evidence actually allow us to conclude about Muslims as a whole? And once we ask that question, the available data becomes much more complicated than the sweeping claim we just heard.
Piers, I just want to. So she keeps talking
Sammy just
about the
rants.
idea. She keeps talking about this idea of rapists and the like. Piers, I went to the website of the Office for National Statistics and the Bureau of Justice of the Americans, and here you can see these are all the victims saying who their perpetrators are. And here they say that it's people that they know, it's their family members, it's their friends, it's their acquaintances. Only this small number over here is done by strangers or what she calls grooming gangs. You can see the overwhelming majority are done by those that they know or those or their relatives. Nobody says this is white Christian sexual epidemic. If you look at the population, she says that they're being taken over. This is the population of Muslims in the UK and in the US. In the US, 1.1%, in the UK, 6%. Tell me, where is the takeover that's taking place
Way too
here?
many.
Piers, when you look at the crimes that are committed against Brits, and I'm a Brit, I'm born and raised here, against our sisters and our daughters and the like, here are the crimes committed by Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris. Nobody says this is white Christian rape. No one says this is a white Christian problem. Everybody says crime has no faith and it has no race. This was committed by vile individuals and justice should be delivered. Piers, when you look at the Office of National Statistics and you see the number of people incarcerated in the UK, you can see that they are overwhelmingly white. But nobody says that this country has a white criminal problem. No one says that this is a Christian problem. Everybody says this is a criminal problem by vile people because crime has no faith and crime has no race. Piers, when you look at the mass shootings in America that kill students and kill their children, this is the data from the Bureau of Justice in America. This is by white shooters, this is by ethnic minorities. No one says that in America they have a white Christian shooting problem because they know crime has no faith, they know crime has no race, and they know that it is individuals who need to be brought to justice.
This is where we need to separate two different arguments. First, the grooming gang scandals were real. Children were abused, perpetrators were convicted, and authorities failed victims in some major cases. Those failures deserve serious scrutiny. But there is a second question. What do those crimes actually prove about Muslims as a whole? And this is where the argument falls apart. The existence of Muslim perpetrators does not prove that Muslims as a group are criminals. Individual guilt does not become collective guilt because the individuals share a religion. Even Piers makes this distinction during the debate. He explicitly acknowledges that the grooming gang scandal was a disgrace and that the perpetrators should have been brought to justice. But he also points out that branding nearly 2 billion Muslims as killers and rapists is an entirely different claim. And that's the key point. We should be able to say both things at the same time. Yes, investigate grooming gangs. Yes, hold every perpetrator accountable. Yes, investigate whether authorities failed because they were afraid to confront uncomfortable issues. But also, do not turn the crimes of individuals into an accusation against an entire religion. That's not protecting victims. That's collective blame. And if we genuinely care about protecting children, then we should want accurate evidence, not political narratives. We should investigate patterns wherever they exist. We should examine ethnicity, culture, community structures, and institutional failures when the evidence supports it. But we also have to be honest about what the evidence does not prove. Because there's a massive difference between saying these particular men committed horrific crimes and saying Muslims are killers and rapists. The first can be investigated with evidence. The second is a sweeping generalization about an entire population. And that's exactly why this exchange matters. You don't have to choose between defending victims and rejecting Islamophobia. You can demand justice for victims without blaming 2 billion people for crimes they didn't commit. You can criticize failures within a community without declaring everyone in that community guilty. And you can call out bigotry without pretending that legitimate criticism should never be allowed. That's what an honest political conversation looks like. And progressive politics needs to remember this too. Never protect our side at the expense of the truth. If a Muslim politician lies, call it out. If a Palestinian activist fabricates something, call it out. If a government fails victims, hold it accountable. But follow the evidence wherever it leads. Because once we abandon that principle, we're no longer fighting prejudice. We're just replacing one form of tribalism with another. The grooming gang victims deserve justice. Real perpetrators deserve punishment. Institutional failures deserve accountability. But none of that requires turning an entire religion into a collective suspect. That's not accountability. That's bigotry. And if you believe we can demand justice without collective blame, and follow the evidence regardless of whose side it helps, subscribe to The Honest Perspective. Truth over access. People over profits. Live. Uncut. Unfiltered. I'm Neil. We don't protect the truth by choosing a side. We protect it by following the evidence. That's The Honest Perspective. And that's where I'll leave you.